You can use both hands. I'll hold the microphone for you. What is this?
So I was at the Wally World, the one true mecca of the South, and I found gummy Lunchables pizza. And wow, oh my God, they sealed this thing.
They don't want anyone into that.
I don't think this is supposed to be open. We may be having a like Raiders of the Lost Ark moment.
It might be a world-ending thing.
Something I never want my Lunchable to be is chewy.
Well, because also they picked a weird food. That is a smell. They picked because
they put the pizza smell in the box with the gummies. Like,
yeah,
you can't just open it up and not get cheesy meat.
Oh God.
And this is actual Lunchable brand. This is not like Pocket Snacks Great Value brand.
And again, they chose a weird food because I would think, hey, do something easy like turkey and cheese and ham, 3 ingredients. They did pizza.
The crust looks like a raw chicken cutlet.
Yes.
It really does.
It's also textured.
Oh, why though?
It's ribbed for her pleasure.
And mine.
And it has gummy pepperoni, cheese, and also a liquid in a bag that's supposed to be the sauce.
Is
So
that
food lube.
So they got a bag of jelly.
Yeah.
That's not jelly.
That's not
like
jelly.
That's just like
it's liquid.
That's about as viscous as motor oil, but the color of cough syrup.
So
I say we skip the
I'm
liquid so it doesn't get
skipping the
everywhere.
liquid. I figured I'll make us all up some cheese and pepperoni.
I can't wait to throat this so hard.
Can I taco it? It'll be a whole lot easier. I feel like
I think that's what we should do.
I think we should do that.
Will
That way it's not
taco the pizza.
Yeah.
And I will. There's enough for everybody.
Yes.
We also.
Yeah, get your hands all over every bit.
That's what makes it
baby.
good.
I promise
Yes.
I washed my hands at some point.
They look like neither
I'd rather you
cheese
didn't.
nor pepperoni.
No.
Cheese, no.
It
It's
looks
not,
so
it's
gross
not cheese.
just
It's not
from
pepperoni.
here.
It is. It's like it looks like Flintstone vitamins are the cheese, and Gushers gummies are your pepperonis. But I don't think that.
I mean, I don't think dropping it on the floor is going to hurt it any. Oh God! Oh, it
feels bad.
It
feels bad.
It feels like I'm holding cold human skin.
The longer I hold it, the more it feels like I'm warming it in my hand.
It feels like how I imagine, like that fake skin for tattoo artists to feel. Like
Fake skin?
Yes.
Or like a
this is like-
fleshlight, but
or-
edible.
a Fleshlight brand edible. There we go. now we know.
I
and
wish you
knowing
didn't say
is half
any of
the
those
power.
phrases. Those
The
words
more
I wish never
hold
come out of your
this,
mouth.
the less I want to put it in me.
All right,
Okay.
boys, on 3.
Oh my
1,
goodness.
2, full thing.
It doesn't taste bad.
That's not a gummy. That is the toughest thing I've ever put in my mouth.
I tried ripping it in half, and I had a real life battle.
The skin flap, that's the really hard part. The little nubbins, the nubbins are good.
None of it is going anywhere. I'm chewing it, but nothing's happening.
The
No,
skin flat bottom, it's so hard. And I like gummies.
That
My
is
jaw
not-
hurts. I'm gonna have to spit this out.
Yeah, me
It's
too.
not bad.
No, it is
but
bad.
it's not
bad.
good.
No, it's bad.
It's bad.
I don't know if you can hear the.
Oh, I can hear it all. It's the worst. I'm the only one, by the way, everyone, with the headphones on. So I know what you're about to experience and are experiencing currently, and I'm so sorry because I'm not editing it out.
I got it
You've
down.
got to suffer
I
with
think
me.
I dropped some.
The taste was actually pretty decent.
I'm gonna try the sauce too.
Oh no!
Okay, Dane,
Watch
can you
your
be my
watch your
microphone?
fingies, yeah.
Okay,
no.
Watch it,
ready?
it's leaking. You're leaking your pizza sauce. How do you?
Oh!
Yeah, there we go.
Oh, that's cough syrup. Oh, that's cough syrup. Oh no! Why is it thick?
This
Why is it
episode brought to you by Lunchables.
Ain't no-
Cough syrup flavor.
Ain't no need for all that fussing. Your pizza sauce is Robitussin.
I want my $5 back. I feel cheated.
Hey everybody, I'm Dane Holland.
I'm Austin Shazam Pfeiffer.
I am Otto. Really wish I didn't eat that cocktail.
And I'm Tiny, and I'm glad I ate that.
And we are Nerded Through the Grapevine, the podcast where four best friends gather weekly to talk about our favorite parts of past, present, and future nerd culture. My mouth is sad. I don't know. I didn't know mouths could feel this.
I feel like it's coated the back of my throat. I can still almost feel it, and I'm very upset at that.
So is it fair to say that our mouths are experiencing a lot of discord? There is a link in our description. Just go down there and click it. Join the Backyard Bonanza. Biological Alien, shout out to you for the server boost. That is, dare I say, titties.
Hell yeah, brother.
Welcome to the Bonanza. So just like this individual, you too could be in there. We're on there live, uncut, uncensored, and irrevocably circumcised.
Oh, I just swallowed it all.
Oh, you were still working on it?
I shook my head so hard from it that my headphones came off my head.
I had to go spit it
I
out of
didn't
the
know what
trash can. So far in my life, I've got a list now. I've got Brussels sprouts. There are no drinks.
There are no drinks?
There's drinks over there in their fridge. You gotta go. You gotta go
I've got
drink.
frozen
I have
water.
drank some out of this.
Thank you.
So you've got Brussels sprouts. You've got freeze-dried anchovies, deep-fried freeze-dried anchovies, mind you, and Lunchables gummies. Those are
we had
We
beans
had
in a
box
box.
beans too.
box beans can be doctored.
Box beans.
Box beans can be doctored.
What do you mean?
Like you mean take them out, make them better?
Huh?
Box beans, you take them out of the box. You
we
make 'em
didn't.
I know.
We
but-
opened the box that was in the car, and we
Okay.
ate the beans.
Okay, straight out the box beans. That it's on the list, but it's not. It's not as bad. I mean, you could throw some bacon in it and put it in a pot. You'll be fine.
Yeah, well, I mean, I honestly didn't think the gummy Lunchable pizza was that bad. The skin flap was the most horrifying texture. Once you got past that, the taste
It
wasn't
was the
bad.
texture and the rigidity
Yeah,
that
it
was
It
concerning.
was definitely like eating a flap of live human skin.
Yes.
When I bit into it and my
Jeffrey
jaw
Dahmer,
locked.
please write in and let us know what your take is on this.
Speaking of people that are killing it, thank you for joining our Patreon to all of our new members, which the last time that we mentioned Patreon, which was maybe last week, I can't remember if we said anything about it or not. Doesn't really matter, but it's the only way we make any money on this, and we've still got a long way to go to get into the black because we're still in the red pretty bad. But
$252,000.
I made some bad financial decisions whenever I started this thing.
that
The strip mall
life-size
studio.
rock.
That
Yeah, that life-size Dwayne The Rock Johnson animatronic.
Yes.
Wow, cool.
Yes.
Poor expensive money, and also the exorcism bill is still he's still needing payment for that.
But it has such a lifelike skin texture.
I really like the
do you think
vocal that they plugged into it though, and I can't ever get over it. Just like hard like rock, and he just pumps his fist. It's very cool.
I really liked it a lot. And we can thank Gene, Lindsay, and Matthew for helping us purchase that live
yes.
animatronic The Rock.
Wait, we had a
figure.
3 boost?
We got 3 people.
Oh, we're up to 5?
We have
Matthew,
5?
Lindsay, and Gene, and they join Tab, which just joined us about a week or two ago, and the OGGG, the Golden Grape,
The goat.
the
Dare I
goat,
say?
a.k.a. 7. They join him in this, what I named Bud Burst is the level that we have, because I looked up of what it takes to make a grape, or to make wine, and one of the first steps in the making of wine is called Bud Burst.
That's
So I was like,
nice.
oh, that sounds nice.
I like
That's
it.
pretty good, right?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
gentle, and it's
It
not
is.
viral because that sounds gross.
Yes. So if any of you want a sticker, which I really want to give all of you a sticker, I just met Gene yesterday. If I would have known, I would have just given him like 5 right then and there. Email me at nerdgrapevine@gmail.com. And you don't even have to be in the Patreon to email me there. You can email me with anything that you want us to talk about.
Feet pics. We need all the feet pics.
You can send those personally to Tiny at phone number.
Or at my last name, if you know that.
I do.
67
I do.
at gmail.com.
Excellent. Or Discord, like you mentioned before.
Or on Discord. That's
Right.
even better. Then we can all
Just
enjoy.
PM us on Discord, and we will hook you up with those 6 stickers, so you can stick them anywhere you really want.
Anywhere.
That's the beauty of stickers; they stick.
Anywhere. Yeah, that's your prerogative.
Even
I don't
on
care
your
where you put it.
body.
Anywhere on your body.
Tiny,
Tiny,
all over you.
what are we talking about?
So there comes a time in every nerd's life
3:30?
Yes, as you're traveling along the seas of nerdism, and you reach a fork in the road, because now the road has become a sea, and you decide, do I take the right fork or do I take the left spoon? And on either side, you have Star Wars and Star Trek, and most people have a favorite.
But
One of the two.
But why? Who made the decision that you had to pick? Because this is one of those like weird situations to where people feel like you have to be one or the other.
I mean, I don't feel like you
Right.
do,
None
but
of
a
us
lot
do.
of people do.
None of us here do.
I enjoy both of these
Yes.
properties. I do enjoy one property more than the other.
Mm-hmm.
And the answer may surprise you which one it is. But to find that out, you have to talk to me on Discord.
Oh, you're not going to tell?
Again.
Oh, the secrets.
Oh.
The secrecy.
I think
The
that-
layers of Tiny.
I think what made the decision wasn't even actually something that was like a decision to be made. It was one features magic in the forefront, one does not feature magic in the forefront. Star Trek is a little bit more of your scientific sci-fi, and your Star Wars is a little bit more
Fantasy sci-fi?
a little bit more fantasy sci-fi.
Yes. Well, I mean, it's not even just a little more scientific in the forefront. It's a lot more. Some nerds, which shout out to Roman. I know you never listen. And you
day.
probably never will. He's the
One
most
day.
angry cook I've ever met. Love the man to death. Anyway, he is a hardcore Trekkie. Like, he can sit down and tell you every bit about the warp theory that takes to run the star drive in the ships. Like, that's a whole other level. And as you're sitting there listening to it, you sit there and you're like, man, this sounds like it could actually be plausible. You know, just the way it, just how it's broken down and everything. Like, it's got so many layers to the show that is driven by the science and everything. Whereas, like you said, Star Wars is more almost like faith-based in a way, because you have the Force and it's mystical and it's magical. It has the elements of some sci-fi with the various spaceships and things, but it's never really explained. They're just there.
Right.
And
Right.
so that's kind of the difference.
So again, like you said, this is a argument that every nerd at one. It's almost like if there was a nerd punch card, you have to have a debate of Star Wars, Star Trek,
Yes.
It's the middle square on
and
bingo.
yes, it's funny because like the only reason they're compared is because they're both considered like nerdy sci-fi topics and they have star in the name,
Right.
but they're completely different in my opinion, because Star Trek is like hard sci-fi. Like you said, everything has a scientific reason and way to happen behind it. But Star Wars is a space opera. There's not really a whole lot of science there. The sci-fi elements are there as set dressing, but it's really about this soap opera of a moody teenager wanting to so hard just get it on with this senator. Like that is the conflict of Star Wars, is one dude got really turned on for the senator and made it the whole galaxy's problem.
Well, I mean, shout out to him, though. He found the one senator that wasn't like 1,000 years old.
Right.
That's true.
They sent a teenager to go hang out with the hot senator and expect nothing to happen.
It's like when the one new girl gets in your class and every boy is all of a sudden like, "Hey,
Who is she?
yeah," and it's like, yeah, it's just because it's the first woman that isn't like a million years old or an alien that you've seen.
Well, kind of like when a girl enters like the card shop or something.
Oh God!
Like all the little nerds at their tables playing Magic,
Start shaking.
like little nerd boys,
Right.
or D&D.
Gross.
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 I wanna
And then you
puke.
wonder,
and they go,
why
gasp.
Something that Star Trek had for a long time going for it that Star Wars did not was the TV series, because Star Trek started off as a TV series, correct?
Yes,
And then they made movies
yes,
to
there's
tie
been
in with the
movies
show.
to kind of like transition between different series and
Right.
to explain plot points that they really didn't want to make like a whole full season arc
Yes.
on, or didn't have the budget to make a full season arc on.
They were pretty contained at the beginning. Like each episode was kind of within
Like
itself.
Monster
Right.
of the Week.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
would be your original Star Trek was
Yeah.
very Monster of the Week.
Yeah.
And also, who is Captain Kirk banging this week? Obviously, it's an alien.
Yep.
And It's like there's themes that have carried throughout all the series because there's always the one person that wants to bang everything. In TNG, I would say that's Riker, which
The
Riker,
Next Generation,
That's
by the
my
way.
boy.
Oh yeah, Riker's
You know?
great.
Well, again,
I
as you said,
I did the chest pound, lip kiss, fingers to the sky in case anybody
I mean,
wondered.
as you said, Tiny, when the aliens come,
So do I.
So do you.
Exactly.
Yeah,
So, you know.
Riker was the man on board, a face, just a bearded face amongst.
Except season 1, he was unbearded.
He was. It was weird.
Yeah, bearded
I can't
Riker,
even-
best Riker.
I think I might have erased that from my head canon.
Yeah.
Just because bearded Riker existed in a world full of plain shavens. Although Sir Patrick Stewart, if he had a beard, he would be too powerful.
Have
He
you
would
seen
be.
him with the beard? He's grown it out a couple of times, and it's intoxicating, really.
Yeah,
go ahead.
I'm sorry.
It's just perfectly angled, and it's just like, oh my god, like I'm almost unworthy of having a beard seeing Sir Patrick Stewart.
I mean, it
with
did
one.
make an appearance in the Picard show,
Which you
in a couple of episodes.
did not give a very good score to.
It got better after the first season.
Oh, okay.
That's the thing with Star Trek. The first seasons, they're always rough, and I'm not even including the original series because they're all just kind of the same thing. So it can't really be rough when it's just a monster of the week thing. But like the first season of TNG was, it's a slog. So if you decide, Mr. Listener or Miss Listener, to go down this rabbit hole, I would suggest start with TNG. And the first season is going to be rough. There are some good episodes in there, but some of them are very rough.
Well, something for me, like whenever you told me that you loved The Next Generation, and I was like, I know I've seen random episodes of it growing up, but I've never sat down and actually consumed it, like as it was intended to be consumed.
Yes.
And I went through and watched, I think, the first few seasons, maybe 2 or 3 seasons, and there was something about it that I likened to the original Star Wars trilogy. And it's just, there's a charm there in the show that you just, even though it's not great, like like the lines are not great, the story most of the time is kind of like, it's fine.
Contrived a lot of
Yeah.
times.
It's not even that good a quality of a show.
Well, you
but-
also have to take into consideration season 1 come out in the late 80s.
Oh, yeah.
So I didn't realize how old it was until looking back at one particular point. I'm like, holy crap. Season 1 was like 1987, 1988.
Yeah, then
no wonder it's the way it is.
See, I never knew that too because I always saw the reruns because I wasn't watching it, back to back to back to back. We didn't have streaming services back in the 90s. I mean, the idea of a streaming service back in the 90s and somebody talking to you about something like that would get you set on fire because you're a witch.
I actually recently went back and watched because I was always more of a Star Wars guy.
Mm-hmm.
I watched a couple episodes of The Next Generation because on BBC America they would play 2 episodes of Doctor Who, then 2 episodes of Star Trek, and I'd watch the Doctor Who and then hang out for the Star Trek. And I went back and watched the first episode of Next Generation, and they had this like a fence in space that was blocking the Starship Enterprise, and I could count the pixels on the thing, and I was like, man, Tiny was right. This did come out in the 80s because that CGI, man, you could smell it. It was strong.
Well, the practical is where it was the charm.
Yes.
Just like in the original trilogy of Star Wars. And it's something Star Wars has gotten back to is practical effects.
Well, because practical brings that bit of heart into it.
Yeah,
like,
and
it makes it
real.
feel more real.
You can touch it. Like if you touched that character's face, that alien's face, you would feel the texture on it. Other than seeing a CGI alien, and it's just, there is a disconnect there. Which that disconnect over time will go away the better graphics get. But just seeing a lesser quality physical like mask on a character. It's just it just feels good. It's like a warm little thing in my heart that I'm sure a lot of people are like, it's so dated. I just can't do it. But I think it's one of those things. It's timeless. It's like the original Star Wars trilogy.
Yeah,
like there's a timelessness to it, even though it's less quality of what you would get something.
Oh yeah.
from
Well, it's
today.
like even though it's less quality, it's almost more quality because the actors themselves can see it and react to it.
Yeah.
Even though sometimes you can see the budget constraints in the costumes of some of the aliens.
See, and now, whenever we have the practical effects that happen in the television shows, for your Star Wars, because I haven't watched any of the Star Trek stuff. That's the new releases of things because I don't pay for those extra streaming services that they come on. But the Star Wars television shows, they do a blend of practical and CGI, and the practical effects budget now has to be through the roof, because if you're seeing somebody that looks like an alien standing in front of you right there, that sumbitch looks like an alien. Mm-hmm. Like, it's not like here's a person with a zipper on the back of their head. Like, the animatronics to go along with the facial structure and the movement and everything else that's happening all at the same time. They no longer have to be wired into remote controls that are operated by Atari joysticks anymore. That's not how it works. You can go wireless control, and you can go. I mean, it's just they're there. Their face is working.
Yes.
And it's convincing.
I remember because 1, 2, and 3 were coming out whenever I was like just in like late middle, early high school, maybe even before that. But I had 2 and 3 on DVD. I remember religiously watching them and then watching the behind the scenes, because I was that weird kid that like I'd watch through the movie once and then watch all of the special features, making of, bloopers, everything. And George really, I know 1, 2, and 3 get a lot of shit for their CGI, but it was really a pioneer. They never made a physical piece of clone armor for 1, 2, and 3. Every time that you see a piece of clone suit armor, it's CGI 110%. Like, it is not real. And I remember they would go through like modeling processes, and like they'd sculpt them all out of clay, and they would have a couple of practical, but he was really wanting to push the envelope with the CGI, and he leaned so hard into it. They replaced Yoda, because in 4, 5, and 6 he was rubber puppet.
Yes.
And then in 1, 2, and 3, I remember seeing them. They were struggling because like we want to give it that rubber puppet feel, but like we also want to do it in CGI because we can have a move easier. And now it's funny to see them going back to a rubber puppet for Grogu.
Yeah.
Because they're like, you know what gives a really good, what makes CGI look really good, like a rubber puppet? Making it a rubber puppet.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and the actors on set, you see them like holding Grogu like a baby, like the actual puppet, and walking around and like laughing, like playing with it and stuff.
Well, because it's easier on the actors, because especially when you're working with like in 1, 2, and 3, they're working with like big name actors. I mean, Ewan McGregor, oh Lord,
Sir
Count Dooku,
Christopher Lee.
Christopher Lee,
that's the one. I knew it was a
like
Sir.
they're working with like a lot of big name actors, and a lot of these guys weren't like, this is right when CGI was coming out. Say they didn't know really how to act to CGI, because you're acting to nothing, like you're having to play off of nothing. So they're going back to practical. Is like, hey, it's a lot easier and get better performances when people could actually see it.
Robin Williams actually spoke on that topic because he was friends with Liam Neeson, and he said, I talked to Liam, and Liam's got such a great actor's spirit. He can embody all these different roles. He said, but he had a problem with Star Wars because this is when CGI is starting to take over and starting to do all that. He said, there's no one there. Mm-hmm. Robin, there's no one there. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. Oh shit, they killed Liam. Like what?
Oh,
what,
no.
They not only killed his character, but they killed his spirit. What are we gonna do?
Yeah.
like I can't believe that that's all it took. Wow.
That's something cool about with Jar Jar, because they had Ahmad Best, I think is his name, something like that. The actor for Jar Jar.
Yes.
I'm pretty sure that's his name.
I think so.
But he had on like this Jar Jar looking head thing on top of his head, and his
It's a
face was
wild-looking
coming
thing.
through the like neck hole of it.
Or
and
they
that
had
was
like
so,
sunglasses on,
Yes.
so you couldn't see his eyes.
Yes, and that's so that the other characters, whenever they were talking with Jar Jar, they were able to look up at where Jar Jar's eyes would be. So that was something that in a character, they were like, okay, well, we can actually interact with this thing a little closer than whenever we're really just supposed to pretend like we're on lava, when really it's just green floor and green wall. But now when they've got the wraparound screen that they use for the visual effects for the actors, and then within that area, which I always forget what that thing is called.
It's called the volume.
The volume, thank you. So on the floor of it, while it's surrounded by these screens, you have the actual like props and stuff that are sitting there, and sometimes not even the full prop. It'll be like the front half of a ship, and the rest of the ship is on the screen.
Anytime you see an inside shot of the Razor Crest, the ceiling is
R.I.P.
not real.
Razor Crest, R.I.P.
Yeah, R.I.P.
Love it.
Whenever they're doing inside shots of like them talking and stuff where it's fully in there, the ceiling is actually the volume.
Yeah.
It cuts off. That's how they have it. Like they run it through the computers and make sure that no matter what angle the camera is looking at, the perspective's right.
Yeah.
So like you'll see it from one angle and it's all stretched and warped, but you look at it from one angle and it perfectly lines up to where you can't tell that the ceiling to this room is actually on a screen 15 feet away from it.
Yeah, and the characters are actually interacting with their surrounding because they're seeing what's going to be on our screen because it's on their screen surrounding them. So they're looking off into the distance, in a desert. That's what they see on the screen in front of them, so they can react that way. And the sun, as it's like in the sky on the screen, is so bright that while they're squinting, it's not because they've got like a spotlight shining on them to simulate the sun. They're looking at what looks like the sun.
Yeah, we've finally hit that happy medium where you can have practical and visual. And so one thing also, to get back on the separating like Star Wars and Star Trek, I think one thing that's done that is Star Wars was able to get into the mainstream. So it's gotten to a point where it has a lot of money behind it, it has a lot of brand power behind it and all this. Star Trek, even at its most popular, is still considered a niche, nerdy thing because like everyone likes Star Wars. Like everyone's seen Star Wars. I haven't watched that much Star Trek. There's some people that like, oh, you mean that that show that weird people like? Well, like, so
I can't say that I agree with that because it's been running since I think the original series was like the 60s and 70s,
right?
And it's still ongoing now. Like they're still making a Star Trek series, so it's not that it's not out there. It's just it is definitely a more niche crowd.
Yeah, sorry. The point I was into is because like the way that stay that niche is it's let it keep its identity. Star Wars has almost lost its identity in a lot of places because like they'll bring in the populace.
People it has,
yeah, and they start writing this stuff for the populace. Every time they've tried to bring Star Trek into the big budget main screen, it's too nerdy for the mainstream crowd and not Star Trek enough for a lot of the Star Trek crowd.
right?
Yeah.
Like the movies, like the Chris Pine movies.
Yes, so they've been.
I really liked the Chris Pine movies with Zachary Quinto and him as Spock.
Well, they're not bad. They kind of go into this. They're okay. I'm getting a little deep trekky. As you watch through the series, there's always some like mirror universe episodes. So it's watching what's happening, but it's off some. So that's what those movies were supposed to be, was like a mirror universe, because Spock ends up being like the only male Vulcan left in the movies. Now, I kind of hated that for him, and I didn't love those movies, but I appreciated that they existed and what they were there for. They're not there to change canon or to give an alternate story. It goes back to the mirror universe episodes. So...
there was something missing from it. The charm, the same charm that you get from the TV show and stuff. It wasn't quite there. But as an action sci-fi movie, it was good. Like I liked them a lot. I thought that the actors did great jobs.
Oh yeah, the actors were great.
But it was missing that
it was
thing.
missing the charm, because the what I like about the shows is the crunchy aspect of some of the poor effects.
Yeah.
There was one child that was playing an alien that looked like she had slices of bologna stuck to her face, and that was her mask. And it's like, what's going on here? And they all still have a little bit of that Monster of the Week feel, but there's a through story that goes through there, and you get to experience the characters just living about their daily life on the starship. You're not just with them for, 6 to 9 movies, depending on what you choose to watch. You're with them for like 8 seasons. That's so many more hours of content that you really get to experience the characters. Like Riker, one of the best characters ever written for Star Trek. Worf, he's great. They almost treat him like a child sometimes. He gets told no more than any other character ever. I found a 15-minute supercut video of people just saying no to Worf.
That's just because most of the things you're saying no to him for is killing things, because he's a warring race.
There's a little more to it than that. He's only half Klingon because he was adopted as a child by these other. It doesn't matter, but he's not full-blooded Klingon. He's never really lived with Klingons. He knows of the culture because his adoptive parents made sure to teach him. And in one episode, you actually get to meet his biological brother and you get to basically experience the whole rite of passage for a Klingon, because he at one point goes through the rite of adulthood, which is really kind of a messed up thing if you look at it, but that's his culture. And
he had to circumcise himself. Like, it was
that's something else. That's Abraham. That's Bible stuff. But he goes through a rite of passage into manhood, and then you get to see his family be dishonored and exactly what that means. And then you get to see his family reclaim their honor and what that means. And
that's a lot of deep looks into one character
exactly.
of a whole ship, too.
Exactly.
That's something really cool about Star Trek.
Yes, and it does that with multiple characters. Like, you get to deep dive into Data. I'm going to talk a lot about TNG because that's my favorite of them, so just beware. You get to find out about Data. No. But I think it's the best series.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I agree.
The Borg were there. The Borg. And honestly, if you wanted to now, looking back on the effects, you can create
7 of 9 is hot.
You can...
You can hit the thing.
Oh, we don't have the...
That's me. I got you. If you want to recreate the Borg spaceship, you can actually do so with 2 items. Two specific things, and I wouldn't say items, but just 2 specific.
A Rubik's Cube and some spray paint.
No, I was gonna say like the inside of the Borg ship. You can do that by having number 1, $200, and number 2, Spencer's gifts.
You're not really that wrong.
You can go and you can buy yourself one of those lightning lights to go on the wall that have all the lightning inside of it just spouting everywhere, just boom, 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 and then you can buy you a couple of strobies, and you might even have some pocket dollars left over to buy you a really tight T-shirt.
See, you joke about that. That's probably exactly what happened. They're like, oh shit, we got to come up with this. Well, get the credit card and go to the mall, baby.
Well, the great part about Star Trek and the practical effects, you can see just everyday items thrown in places. Like, they'll be working on this super high-tech thing, and you're like, I think part of that's a cheese grater.
Well, it's really funny because
Star Wars does that too, in all fairness.
Well, because like back in the day, most practical effects are made out of garbage. Like, it's literally like we have a bunch of junk in the prop room no one wants to use. Luke's lightsaber in episode 4 is actually a flashbulb holder with some rubber grips glued onto the side. If you look, you can see a Phillips head screw and a Made in Wisconsin label. Yeah. If you like an engraving on it, if you can, or like Made in USA or something, if you can zoom in on it, like get a good quality picture of it, you can see it, because it was literally a flashbulb holder. Like, if you see one of these, you're like, that's a lightsaber.
So basically what you're saying is, if you buy a film used, not replica, but a film used prop of the lightsaber, don't be mad when it's just cheap garbage.
Yeah. Well, like, because a lot of it, especially with TV quality back then, you just had to make it work, because like it's in 240p. Like,
right. It's a little fuzzy
it's
anyway.
Gonna be
no one's going to see
like
it.
4 different ways in a CRT. Like, as long as you can squint hard enough and it looks real. They had like an 8-foot rule instead of a 3-foot rule nowadays.
So if it squints, it's mint.
Right. Hey, man, as long as it passes on the big screen.
Well, and also, like, they didn't have budgets for stuff. Like, whenever these things were first starting out, it was just find the garbage, paint it silver, and put it on the screen.
Oh, yeah. So, like, one of my favorite episodes from the first season, there's a Next Generation. There's a race of aliens that you never see. A lot of other things happen that you're just like, okay, clearly all these other things took precedence over getting to see these aliens on the view screen, because the view screen was just white. Like, you saw nothing, you heard their voice, and you're like, and they had to give them a line that was like, hey, show us yourselves, and they're like, we don't trust you yet until you do our ceremonial greeting thing. and he does it at the very end of the episode, and you still don't get to see him.
Why do it if you
Roll
don't
credits.
have to?
Exactly.
And that's something with Star Trek as opposed to Star Wars. In Star Trek, it's so much more about each individual character. Like, all the stories are about the characters within that universe.
Yeah.
And the things around them are just kind of happening to them and happening around them. And it's all about how the characters are getting through it.
Exactly.
And in Star Wars, it's a little more about the big plans and the big actions and the war, going on, and the Jedi versus the Sith. And you do have individual characters and you get into their stories, but it's not even close to as much as like spending an entire episode, on how a single character goes through their rite of passage into adulthood. Even with Star Wars TV shows, we're not going to get much of that because that's not going to sell like a new toy.
Exactly.
That's not going to get people talking about it.
Exactly.
And
a lot of
they won't
Star
do the time.
Wars is just tell me because you don't have the time to show me.
Right.
I think the closest thing we got to something like that would be the Clone Wars or Rebels TV show. I didn't watch a whole lot of Rebels.
Yes, the animated series for sure.
And that's almost like, because I heard the way I describe the Clone Wars is it is band of brothers, but there's lasers. Because it's not really telling a Star Wars story, because it's in a great thing where like it's in between two movies that have already come out. So we kind of know what's happening. So you're kind of able to get more into that monster of the week. And as a kid, it's one of my favorite TV shows, honestly, because it humanizes the clones. You get to spend those times of like, hey, what's it like being a clone, or what's it like when they have to go fight on this planet or work with these people? You almost get more time with it, so it humanizes it. That's the benefit of Star Trek, is where it's always stayed TV form. You get that. You don't have to squeeze an entire chunk of a story into 90 minutes. You can just tell a story, because you have 22, and then you have 8 more of these this season. Or back then it was even longer, because they made longer seasons. It's
yeah. I think season 1 was like 27 episodes.
Yeah, so
TV.
it's like you have 27 episodes of 22 minutes to tell these stories. So even if you need to tell a season-long story, you have time. You can tell personal stories and get more of that character out of it rather than telling a story.
Well, see, this is wild because in Star Trek, the main series is based off of this type of storytelling. And in Star Wars, you have to want to watch the animated series. It's not in the forefront. It's not the thing coming out in theater. It's not the thing airing on the big major networks. You've got to go watch a kids show. For a lot of people, they're like, oh, it's the kids version of Star Wars. I don't want to watch that, when it really wasn't. But it's something that you've got to take effort to get the nitty-gritty stories, the individual aspects of all these different characters. When in Star Trek, that is what you get.
That's what it is.
This is the meat of the story.
Especially before streaming services, you had to be there to
Yeah.
watch it at a time.
Yeah.
Like before the internet, it's like, if you were wanting to watch this, you had to either catch a premiere of it to know when it was airing, or get a TV guide and look at what channel and when it was going to show, or when the next episode of that one is going to show if you miss it.
You just dated us, man, with
Yeah.
TV Guide.
Yeah,
my
TV
parents
Guide,
had
I
a
forgot about that.
subscription at one point.
Yep.
And I did the
remember
crosswords in the back.
Yeah, some of my favorite Star Wars content is that of the Clone Wars, or even the Bad Batch is great also, and just Rebels. Rebels is so good too, but it's because you get these micro stories,
Right.
the stuff that there's heart. It humanizes these characters, like the clones. Those are my favorite episodes of the Clone Wars. Are the ones that had 0 Jedi in them.
Yeah, the only Jedi were there to be like the general, just to move the plot
Just
forward.
to watch.
But then it was like the one where they're protecting Rishi Station, where there is not a Jedi in the entire thing. It's all the entire. One dude basically plays the entire thing, because the same voice of the clones is all the same guy.
Yep.
So it's basically one dude recording an entire episode with himself, and it's one of my favorite episodes because it humanizes him. It's like, because in the movies they're very much like they were just another form of a droid, just a faceless, nameless throw thing at it so you can show millions of people getting killed without making people upset. But the series is like, oh, they're like their own people. And you even get to see that from the droids, because even in the later episodes, the droids almost become characters. But it's because you have time to fill it out.
Yeah.
Well, and like you said, you have to. It's more of a slog for somebody like me. I'm not. I can appreciate animation and the work that goes into it, but if I want to sit down and watch a show, I don't really want to watch an animated thing. It's not my thing. And so Star Trek, it fills that for me. It gives me that, sci-fi kind of thing, but I'm not stuck watching, like you said, a kid's show.
Right.
Because to me, I'm one of those that it feels like I'm watching a kid's show.
Well,
and that's not to bash what they're doing or anybody that watches it. It's just not my bag.
But also, Star Trek looks a lot better in real life than Star Wars does. I don't like Star Wars in real life. I think it works better as an animated series. All of my favorite Star Wars is animated, at least when you're handling Jedi, which is what 90% of Star Wars is.
Yep.
Because Star Trek it's just humans, but thousands of years in the future.
Well, it's also superhumans because your Jedi get to use the Force.
Yep.
So you're watching
flying around,
people
flipping
flinging
around.
laser swords, flying around, throwing rocks at each other. I got the high ground. And then you get over to Star Trek, and it's just a dude.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a dude in pajamas, essentially.
It's basically
walking
a flip
around
phone.
with a gun on his hip,
Phone and a gun.
Well, it's an NCO officer in the military that's just like, this is just his job is to just go in.
Well, there's a debate whether or not they're military.
Well, just some form of government.
Right, yeah, it's definitely
agent.
a government organization.
It's
but
just a dude.
yeah, it's just a dude following orders, giving orders, flying around on a spaceship with thousands of people, with people's families on there.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to go ahead and say it. I don't like Wesley Crusher. Horrible character. I hate every Wesley Crusher centric episode. And for everybody who's like, who the heck is that? That's Will Wheaton.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I hate his character. Me and my friend Mac have determined that when he's sitting and helping fly the ship, he's only controlling the brake light. Because the funny thing is, anytime you see the back of the Enterprise that's stopping, there's a red light on the back, and I'm like, that's a brake light, homie. I don't know if that's what you intended that to be, but that's a brake light, and that's what Wesley's doing. Because he's a child.
If anyone listening to this or in the past has thought, I want to get into Star Trek, but it's like it's been going on for so long, and maybe you have tried The Next Generation, and maybe it is dated for you. Maybe it just doesn't work because it's just not new enough. The Orville, I think, is
that's kind of a happy medium.
Perfect way for you to get into a Star Trek-esque environment.
Yeah,
because
Orville's great.
It's so good, and they keep that Star Trek.
It does have
grit.
a Star Trek feel,
Yeah.
but it has a little bit more of a modern take on some things.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, they're making a new Star Trek series now. I think it's called Enterprise, which in chronological order, it's way before even Kirk. But it's still modern takes on it. So there's still other series out there for you to go. And if you don't want to be on a ship that's exploring the cosmos, there's DS9 or Deep Space Nine. It's a space station. So it's basically a city in space, almost like a port where things are coming and going constantly, and they're on the edge of Federation space and Cardassian space. Not Kardashian, but
Are you
Cardassian.
sure? Oh, okay, all right, fine.
And you still get to see some of the greats because they're still involved and they're still active at that time. So you see Worf, you'll see, Captain Picard, and some of these others come and go. And then you also have Voyager, which Voyager and Deep Space Nine were aired at about the same time. There was some overlap. There was, I think, a year that Deep Space Nine aired before Voyager. But however, so you can get a bunch of different feels and a bunch of different takes throughout the universe. You're not just stuck on a ship.
Right. If you don't like one set of characters, there's
Right,
an
move on to
entire
another
other
set.
series that you can watch. If you're like, I like this universe and I like the idea, but I'm not clicking with the characters, try another show.
Right.
Because it's there.
Yeah, Janeway's a pretty decent captain, too. I'm not a huge fan of Deep Space Nine. For me, it's a little slow, but that might be... But there are some really cool and interesting characters in there. Because on the station, there are some Cardassians that basically left their empire, and they want to just be friends with people. And the Tailor is some kind of super spy.
Cool.
But now he's just a tailor. But there's a few episodes centric around him, and you're like... There's way more to this guy than what, we know. And you get to see different aliens come on as you go through the series because you first see the Ferengi in The Next Generation, but it's only like 2 episodes. You get to see them, but then you get to Deep Space Nine, and you get to learn about their culture and how they're very just money driven, and they've got the rules of acquisition. And Quark is just an amazing character. The universe is constantly growing and evolving and changing and adding to, and I don't feel that Star Wars is really doing that. It's a lot of the same stories and a lot of, this is over in the extended universe. We'll pull this in here to get these other people so we can get more money. Whereas I don't get that feel with Star Trek.
Yeah,
granted, they want money too.
Right, but they're also not selling
like a money
T-shirts at
grab.
Walmart like Star Wars is.
Also, I want a big man's Next Generation uniform shirt. If you find one, let me know. I've been looking.
Yeah, that's something I was going to say. Is Star Wars is like the opposite of that. If you want to have one universe where you're pretty much following the same story, just in multiple generations, that's kind of where the Star Wars movies lean to. Because it's always about the Skywalkers. And
yes,
even as a Star Wars fan, I love Star Wars.
Oh, yeah.
I have preached its praises so many times.
Yes.
I'm so tired of the Jedi. I'm so tired. I don't want to hear about the Jedi anymore. If you're going to tell me a Jedi story, give me Old Republic or years in the future. There's so much... And like you said, there's so much extended universe stuff that can be good and can be interesting and fun to watch. But they're like, no, let's just do 20 years past where we went last time. It's like, I don't care.
Exactly.
The universe isn't different enough to justify giving me 3 more adventures in it. I want to see, like, the Old Republic. The Old Republic looks great. I want to see more, like, maybe in between periods or even, like, Mando stuff. Just, if you're going to tell me stories in that time, don't give me Jedi. And that's what Star Wars problems is they're almost afraid to reinvent themselves. Because every time they do, the next season, it's back to the same thing.
Right.
Well, it's like, don't get me wrong, like, I love Jedi. And one of my favorite games, Star Wars-wise, was Knights of the Old Republic. I mean, I personally... I kind of feel like I need a Jedi when I watch Star Wars.
Yeah.
But I do like the other characters around there, too, because, like, the first 2 seasons of Mandalorian I loved so much, and there was nary a Jedi to be had.
Right.
And I didn't miss it, and that's rare. That's very rare for me.
I think with Star Wars, too, they almost feel like it's too late to not have Jedi now, because everything they've made in the past has been the culmination of Jedi and the Force. And with Star Trek, they have taken these risks of, all right, let's just do another ship, another crew, totally new characters. Right. You know nothing about the other ones in this world.
Exactly.
Like, you just know these, and they can keep doing that because they did it not far into their history.
Right. And there's different callbacks and things. I saw a clip from the newest series of Star Trek, and if you've ever watched Next Generation, Riker cannot sit or stand in a chair normally. No. It's always leg over the back. He gets out of the chair the way he gets into the chair, which to me is more impressive.
Oh, yeah.
And in the new one, I don't even know who the character is. He sits in a chair like Riker does, and he goes, Riker. And so it went to Jonathan Frakes, who they showed him that clip, and he loved it. Like, he laughed so hard. He's like, that's amazing.
That is cool.
There's other callbacks. There's like Q, which if you've seen Star Trek, you know who that is.
Yeah.
He's a recurring character in Next Generation. Well, he goes into other series too. You see him, and then I don't know if that actor is with us any longer, but you still see people from the Q Continuum pop up just messing with humanity, because that's what Q did.
Yeah, something we see a lot more in Star Trek is there's some, like, weird humor, and a thing that the show is very self-aware sometimes, that it's like, we know this is kind of silly, but we're kind of playing on that too. And Star Wars had, other than Jar Jar, which everyone saw how that ended up being taken by audiences, it's great when they do introduce the humor, but sometimes it does feel a little forced.
Yes.
That's pretty punny, actually.
Yeah. That's what you did.
So that's why in Star Trek, to me, every time something like campy, funny, very self-aware happens, it just flows so well with it because it's part of its charm. But whenever sometimes that happens in Star Wars, it's a little all right. Like
Well,
you're just trying.
yeah.
You're just trying to be like, we're not all serious in
Right,
war
like
and
in
government. Like it's still
episode,
fun.
What, 7 or 8, The Last Jedi? It was too much. Like they kept trying for those little bits of humor,
Right.
and it felt like I was getting a sledgehammer to the back of the head.
Well, and I think it's because it's such a hard tonal shift to what they are. Because the universes are completely different. Star Trek is a utopia. Like if you're in
Yeah,
the Federation, there's no money. People don't want for things. You just
You just go up to the replicators, say, "I want
I want this.
Earl Grey
Right.
hot."
Whereas Star Wars is a dystopia. The galaxy is always at war. There's bad things happening. Everything's always broken. Everything's the worst. Either you have money and you can buy all these nice fancy things, or you don't and you live in squalor. And there's war. I mean, that's one big. There was one big thing on a couple arcs in the Clone Wars where it focused on the people on the wars, and they're just like, I don't know. Our planet decided to go with the Separatists, and then the clones came in. Just started attacking us, and luckily our battle droids were there to save it. It humanizes it, and I was like, oh, these are people on both sides of this conflict. Whereas Star Trek, yeah, there's evil people attacking, but it's on outside. It's we have to protect our people because our people are valuable, and we have to bring our goodness to everyone else because we can help them.
Well, they also have to follow the Prime Directive, though,
Exactly.
of not interfering. So they have to figure out how to solve said crisis and still honor the Prime Directive.
Which is more Jedi than what the Jedi should have been,
Yeah,
too.
pretty much.
Exactly,
It's-
because
They're protectors.
the Jedi, when we see them, were corrupt, old. It was a religion that got in bed with the state.
Right.
And then this is what it turned into. They got just lax arms of the government that were able to use their religion to do stuff because Star Wars isn't a happy universe to be in.
Yeah.
Star Trek is happy. Star Wars isn't happy. So when Star Wars makes jokes, it's like, hey, man, I get you're trying to make a joke, but also that dude just died.
Yeah, that dude just literally exploded.
He
And
got cut in half with a laser sword. I don't feel like making a joke about it
Yeah.
now.
What's weird-
Oh no, your foot went through the bottom of your weird mechanical thing. Homeboy over there is dead, and his family's not even going to have pieces to mourn.
His women and men and the children, they were all slaughtered. We don't have time to joke.
Exactly.
But what's strange is even though we just talked about how Star Trek is a utopia, everything is futuristic, sleek, like in the future, but Star Wars is like dirty. People are actually having to use junk to make it work for them, and yet Star Wars looks cleaner. Like it looks squeakier, like a squeaky clean, a more touched up, a more refined situation than Star Trek does. Because even Star Trek, like you mentioned, that kind of crunch that Star Trek has, even though everything is in this sleek futuristic setting, it still feels grittier.
Yeah, well, I mean, oh God, one episode of TNG, they go to this planet that's just this utopia, and they kind of lead you to believe that they just have big orgies everywhere all the time. Yeah, they do. And their law, they have two people that are like the nipples of authority. Their outfits look like they're made out of like silk bed sheets, and you see nipples, and I'm like, I don't know how you didn't have a nut slip or something if you're running around. Well, the punishment zone is where illegal things are on this planet.
Oh.
It moves every day, so you don't know where it is, so everybody just obeys the law and does what they're supposed to. Enter Wesley Crusher. He's out playing with children because he's a child, and they're playing catch, and he jumps and catches the ball, falls into this little greenhouse of flowers, and just breaks some things. You know, it was an accident thing, and it wasn't that big of a deal. However, that was the punishment zone for that day. The only punishment on this planet is death. So the nipples of authority arrive, these two dudes, and they're like, oh, he's like, I'm sorry, I didn't know, da-da-da. They're like, well, you're in the punishment zone. And so Picard has to try to figure out how to not let the nipples of authority kill technically one of his crews because he was an acting ensign at this time. Yeah. And even if he wasn't, it's the child of one of the people on his ship. So he has to honor the Prime Directive and figure out how to get Wesley from being killed for falling on a flower. And I don't know, it's just kind of one of those interesting things to see how they play it out, because they almost have to go around it in a way.
Yes.
And still not break it.
Right, because in Star Trek, all of their missions have to involve some kind of clever thought to work with the situation and those involved in it and try to get what they want done. But in Star Wars, it's, do you have a laser sword? Do you have a laser sword?
Yes.
We need that to stop. Let's go cut it.
Let's go laser sword
Let's
it.
go laser sword
And
that.
there is not one single nipple of authority in Star Wars.
Not one. Well, no, we do see Anakin's whenever he in bed, whenever he raises up in bed and he's all sweaty from his.
But he's not
like
in an authority.
I remember that.
He's just nipple, not nipple of
Right.
authority.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're more fan of skin flappy than nipply in Star Wars. Their aliens have a lot of like skin flaps and folds.
Yeah.
Well, just to hop in on this conversation.
Yeah, please
welcome
do.
back.
We're at the
Please.
Vapesack,
Come
by
back.
the way.
So,
if anyone didn't know.
Vapesack 3, I've
Trinity.
not stopped. Again.
Yeah, there were just like 8 people standing in here, and then just you to work it. I wanted to get up and help, but I don't know the system here. So.
No, it's better off that you don't.
Yeah.
Just because I have to make my way downtown, walking fast, face passing, I'm homebound.
Yep.
So I wanted to hop in on this thing that you had mentioned earlier while I was up walking around. And
Was it the nipples of authority?
No, it was
Yeah.
the Orville. And the Orville actually does kind of what Star Trek. It takes that idea of Star Trek, and I don't want to say dumb it down because it's still a very clever show.
Oh, yeah.
But it makes it less about you have to think harder about what the moral of the story is, and they put it more out front as kind of like, I don't know, more of a driving force as opposed to you having to think more about it.
It's
like
a more in your face.
It's
kind
more.
of deal.
It's a more in your face point of this is why we have to do it this way.
It's more accessible.
Yes, but I mean, and Star Trek's been doing the same stuff for a little while. Trying to, push for equal rights and doing all this other stuff. And even though it's not been like equal rights, it's trying to push for equal rights. Heck, there's not a single only one type of race on the whole ship.
Right.
So I mean, it's been trying for a long time to be inclusive, to be inclusive to all category of species that is in that show. I mean, you got just like with Worf being the Klingon, and he's of the warring race, and they're having to, he's on the ship, and they're always telling him no.
Yeah, and he's the only one of his race in the Federation.
Yes.
Because at this time, canonically, they just finished a big war between the Klingons and the Federation.
All right, good talk.
So
See you
now
guys.
they're kind of at peace.
Oh, did you get another person? Beans.
Well, I was trying to help further his point, but
Yeah. Well, I think because also that comes down to who the main fan base has been for a while. Because while the first 2 Star Wars movies were kind of very underground, like the first Star Wars movie was kind of a B movie. Like it wasn't like huge, and then it exploded because it was the first thing we ever saw like that. Mm-hmm. So it's been made more for like how the common people feel, like that fan of like, hey, let's tell you a fun story. Whereas Star Trek, the fan base has always been kind of like nerd, outcast, like this more niche one. So those people are usually generally more inclusive as...
Well, it's less hero's journey and more inclusivity just in general.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Because Star Wars is a hero's journey. Every one of the trilogy of trilogies is a hero's journey, be it Luke or Rey or Anakin.
There's this giant galactic force that's going to kill everybody, and it's your job to figure out how to stop it. Yep. Whereas in Star Trek, it's like, hey, there's a big old galaxy out there. Let's go find some friends and, help see what's going on out there, you know?
Yeah, everything in Star Trek isn't about the galaxy in danger. It's a lot of times one character, one figure, and maybe you just met them in that episode. Maybe it's some alien race. They're having a difficult situation, and the gang wants to help out in any way they can without starting a war.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. Several episodes of, yet again, Next Generation, they enter into a conflict as a mediator, or they bring a mediator so they help them arrive at a peaceful resolution without tainting their culture with the Federation's culture. You know, they want to bring you in and make you part of the collective, yes, but they don't want to change who you are. They want to celebrate you as you are, but bring you into the fold.
That's their whole point.
Yes.
Whereas in Star Wars, if you're part of either the Republic, the Empire, the New Republic, you know, whichever one, or the Separatists, it's like a state. It's like more becoming a state. Like you're in the United States of America, where you're in this, and now you have to follow these laws. You can have a couple that are just yours, but you have to use this currency, you use this thing, this is your military, like you have to pay taxes to this. Whereas Star Trek, like I said, it's hands off. It's how can we help you with your problem, but not make it us themed, you know?
Exactly.
Because you run into that sometimes. Like everyone does things differently because each planet isn't like, in Star Trek, it's like, here's a desert planet, here's a snow planet, here's a forest planet. Or Star Trek, it's like, here's just a planet. There's everything here. It's its own people.
I mean, some planets are more, you know, one thing, but there's also some with biomes.
Yeah.
You get to see the Federation make contact sometimes with alien races that nobody's ever met before. Picard gets stranded on a planet with one whose language is solely based on a story, and they have to learn how to communicate. And by the end of the episode, he learns how he can communicate some, because every time he goes to talk to the guy, he says like one of 4 lines with a little bit different inflection to indicate different things. And until he figures out the basis of this language, they're both completely clueless about each other. Like, Picard doesn't know if this other guy's hostile or not.
And like even with hostility, Star Trek exists within the gray areas of, is this a hostile situation or is it not? Is it just misunderstood?
Yeah.
Is it something that we can learn more about the situation, so maybe we can, you know, have the situation exist in an area to where no one's hurt, but no one really wins. And it's these gray areas. And yet with Star Wars, it's very black and white.
It's shoot
Sith,
first.
Jedi. They're scared to exist within that gray area, because within the extended universe, a gray Jedi or whatever is this type of Jedi that doesn't follow the typical Jedi stuff, that takes a couple things from the darker side and mixes it in with the light side, and you exist in this gray area. Yeah. But they won't make it canon, because they're like, no, we can't do that, because Rey was almost that. Like, the story of Rey could have been that. The story of
Luke
Kylo
was
could have been that
too.
Same
almost.
with Ahsoka.
Right? Yeah,
Ahsoka
did the same thing,
well,
but they're still finding ways to go, no, we can't let them be in the middle. They gotta be back on this side.
They have this thing like there has to be a hero, there has to be a villain, whereas the Gray Jedi is all about balance between emotions and intelligence and all these things. And you can use logic and you can be emotional, but how do you respond in the most effective manner? And they just cannot figure that out. That it has to be this or this.
Because, so here's, you get to lord up about Star Trek. I'm going to lord up about the Jedi a little bit. So,
do it.
Dump all over me,
The
Dad.
Jedi is the newest version of what the original religion was called, the Jedi. The Jedi, not Jedi, Jedi.
From Jeddah.
Yes.
There was an
And
apostrophe.
they lived on a planet. Originally, it was its own species, and then other species joined in. They lived on a planet that was very heavy in the Force, and it had 2 moons. It had a moon that was more in the light side of the Force, and a moon that was more in the dark side of the Force. And the original idea was you lived on the planet, and then if someone started getting too close into the light, they'd send them onto the dark side moon until they balanced back out. And if they're getting too close to the dark, send them to the light side moon. So the original Jedi were that there is no light without dark. There is no dark without light. Like, you can have emotion and also answer things calmly, collectively, and without emotion, but still think of, like, caring for this person. But as with most things, it splintered off, and, like, one side's like, oh, no, actually, like, the dark side is really cool, and you can get more powerful if you're in the dark side. Like, well, you know what? We think the light side is really cool and not going to be like you nerds that are, like, edgy over there. And then, like, it blossom into a multi-galactic space war where eventually like there would be Sith planets where like the entire planet was just Sith lords and their slaves, and eventually the Jedi dropped a force bomb that nuked everyone's force spirit and basically put everyone into purgatory, and they say that if you're force sensitive, you can still hear the screaming if you go by it.
There's some Star Wars.
And then they, Darth Sidious's master came up with the rule of 2 because
That was Bane, if I'm not mistaken, wasn't
I
it?
think so. I think Bane may have been later.
Darth Bane was around that time.
Right,
Anyway.
but and like, so they were like, hey, the Sith always are fighting power, so maybe we should come up with less people. Like, you can only have 2, a master and an apprentice, so the apprentice can eventually kill the master and take their own apprentice. Like, we know it's going to happen.
Yeah,
It's just
however, the Sith always tries to find someone weaker than them. So in fact, they're weakening themselves if they don't get killed.
right. Well, and that's kind of like the
great.
moral of it. Of like, if you're chasing
Right.
power, like eventually you're going to eat your own tail. But then that also creates this environment where that's the story. Is it's shoot first. Like, if this guy, assume this guy's threatening me until proven otherwise. Whereas Star Trek, it's like, assume this guy isn't threatening me. Even the first episode, because I haven't watched a whole lot of Next Generation. I just watched the first couple of the first episode of it. They're in a thing where like, the Klingon, Worf is wanting to fight, and even Picard's like, hey man, like, we don't do that here. Like, we don't know if these guys are hostile yet. Like, we could start something, so let's try to talk our way out of it first.
It set the tone for new
Yeah.
reviewers.
Well,
for
episode
people that never watched Star
1
Trek.
of Next Generation, it's a trial on humanity in general.
Yes.
To see if they are a detriment to the existence of everything else. And that's what Q was there doing, is putting them on trial. I can't remember the exact words he used,
Yeah.
but they go through many different points of the humans' timeline that have existed in that universe, and the crew of the Enterprise is trying to explain to this basically omnipotent being that no, we're not hostile, we're not what we used to be, we're where we are now, we're peaceful, we're just trying to
Right.
explore and learn. That's where we're at. I know you've seen where we was, but that's not where we are now.
Which is, again, different than Star Wars, where it's
Yes.
like, you wronged me once. You are Sith. It doesn't matter if you're trying to be better. It doesn't matter what your reasons are. You are the enemy.
Yeah, it is assumed that if they are not a Jedi with a
Right.
lightsaber, they must be Sith.
Whereas Star Trek is like, hey, yeah, we were like that. We have a shitty past. We own it. But we're not. We have moved past it. We have healed past
That's
it.
something I wanted to talk about. Is in Star Trek, there are flaws. Like, all the characters have flaws. They make mistakes. They make moral decisions that they don't even know if it was the right decision sometimes. And sometimes they'll leave it on that too. They don't just button everything up with the day was saved, everybody was right, all the bad people are gone. Like, sometimes it's a situation to where you don't know if they made the right decision or not, and they just have to move on with their lives. But in Star Wars, like we talked about, the hero's journey, it's formulaic because the good guys win. Like, the good guys make the right decision, and then in the end, the bad guys lose. And it's very obvious who ends up winning and who ends up losing,
Right.
because it is the hero's journey. It's not this different thing of flawed natures and tackling things in a way that you're not even sure what to do, or not even sure if you did the right thing. But we're saying all this stuff, and it's like, we love Star Trek and we hate Star Wars. Not the case. We're just pointing out how different these situations
Absolutely.
are. Because
I love both properties.
yes, but you go to both of them when you want something specific. If I want the hero's journey, if I want that formulaic thing of where I'm
wanna
following the hero,
I can overcome
Yes.
this great evil in my life. I want to watch Star Wars. But also, if I want to be like, hey, maybe I want to see how humanity can be better.
Yeah.
You watch Star Trek.
right?
Yeah.
They are apples and oranges. They have star in the name, and that's pretty much the only similarities that they have. In the end, whichever one that you watch, you can love them both equally. Like, you don't have to pick, and we're not going to make you pick. You
can
probably
like
already
more-
picked.
You can like more than one thing. It's possible.
Yes, things can be two things. In this
Yes.
case, a nerd can be a Trekkie and
A
a
warzy.
warzy.
Yeah.
I don't know,
Does
one
that
of
mean,
the two.
Does that mean you're bi?
Yes, absolutely.
Hell
I'm
yeah.
by
Bi
Star
nerds.
Wars. I'm
We
by
are-
Star.
I'm bi-star.
Bi-star.
Yes.
Hell
I like
yeah.
both
We
stars.
created bi-star, baby.
We don't have the cannon bell. We don't have the cannon bell. We have to canonize
Dang
it.
it!
We'll add it in
Make the
post.
motion. Make the
Making
motion.
the motion.
That's all that
We'll
matters.
add it in post.
As long as Tiny's the one doing it, that makes it canon.
Yeah.
So thank everybody for joining us today. Austin, unfortunately, wasn't one of those, and you got to be a part of the show just as much as he did. But I don't know if we mentioned following us on social media. We don't do much there, but we may start doing some more. And with Patreon, we're gonna start doing some more stuff for our Patreon members, so that way there's some more incentive other than you just feeling amazing because you're helping us pay for our monthly dues towards Buzzsprout.
And
which puts
speaking
everything
And
out.
our strip mall studio.
And our
And
strip mall
speaking of
studio.
stars, you can give us 5 of those
Ooh.
anywhere you're listening to. Just you don't have to be. You can be Pentastar. You don't have to just be by. You can be Pentastar and give us 5 of those bad boys.
Please
Just
do.
anywhere you're listening to, whether you love us, hate us, just give it to us. This isn't a question that we are demanding the 5 stars.
Yeah, you can say we're either 5-star good or 5-star bad.
Yes, as long as
it's 5.
I don't care.
We only like increments of 5.
And just like you're going to give us 5 stars, life is going to give you grapes. And what are you going to do with those?
You're gonna put them in your brown star.
Da, 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 da. Oh, that's cough syrup. Oh, that's cough syrup. Oh no. Why is it thick?